You think he's winning by ignoring you. You think he's strong because he pulled away first. But let me tell you something that will flip this entire dynamic on its head. The man who pulls away and ignores you is not in control. He's exposed. His silence isn't power, it's a mask. And behind that mask is a weakness he hopes you never figure out. But today, we're going to rip that mask off. Because when a man distances himself and pretends like you don't matter, it's not confidence. It's a desperate attempt to avoid something he can't handle. Your value, your boundaries, and your emotional power. You've been spending too much energy decoding his silence, when what you really need is the playbook that reveals what his silence costs him. That's what this is. You're not here to chase clarity from someone hiding. You're here to understand the truth that will shift the entire game. And once you see what I'm about to show you, you'll never beg for attention again. You'll know exactly what to do, and he'll be the one haunted by your silence. When a man pulls away, most women immediately assume it's because he's in control. He's setting the tone, calling the shots, regulating the pace of the connection. But that interpretation is almost always wrong. In reality, when a man creates distance out of nowhere, it's not a power move. It's a panic response. His silence is often not about you at all. It's a reflex rooted in his inability to regulate discomfort. Whether it's intimacy, vulnerability, or accountability, something triggered him, and rather than communicate or work through it, he pulls away to regain a false sense of safety. What looks like confidence is often emotional avoidance in disguise. He acts like he's unbothered, like he's got everything figured out, but inside, he's overwhelmed by things he doesn't have the emotional tools to express. Many women misread this silence and start panicking themselves, texting more, asking what's wrong, trying to fix what they think they broke. But that just feeds his illusion that he's in charge, when in truth, he's spiraling internally and hoping you never notice. When you chase a man who's ignoring you, you're not helping. You're reinforcing the very dynamic that keeps you disempowered. The smarter move is to stop believing his silence is strength. When a man emotionally disconnects without explanation, it's not maturity, it's a pattern. And patterns always have roots. Often those roots trace back to unresolved childhood dynamics, a fear of abandonment, rejection, or losing his sense of self. Though instead of facing those fears like an adult, he withdraws and pretends it's because he's thinking, or busy, or needs space. But the truth is, space feels safer than showing up with real emotional accountability. Recognizing that can shift everything in how you respond. One of the biggest mistakes women make is internalizing the distance as a sign of their inadequacy. They think, if I had said less, if I had been more chill, maybe he wouldn't have pulled back. But that's the trap. The second you start editing yourself to accommodate a man's emotional avoidance, you start shrinking in the relationship. What you should be doing instead is standing still in your truth. Let him deal with the storm he created. That's where your power lies. Not in proving your worth, but in refusing to question it just because someone else can't handle it. If he pulls away when things get emotionally real, that's not strength. That's self-protection dressed up as self-control. A man who's emotionally equipped doesn't need to disappear to process his feelings. He stays, he communicates, he shows up, even when it's messy. But when he doesn't have that capacity, distance becomes his defense mechanism. He's hoping silence will give him back control, not over the relationship, but over the feelings he doesn't know how to handle. And every time you take his bait, you reinforce the illusion that it's working. When a man starts ignoring you, what he doesn't realize is that he's putting his emotional immaturity on full display. Silence isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of someone who never learned how to handle real emotions. He might think he's being calm, detached, or in control, but in reality, he's reacting like a boy who never learned how to have hard conversations. Ignoring someone you've built a connection with isn't emotional discipline. It's emotional dysfunction masked as strategy. The longer he stays silent, the clearer it becomes that he lacks the tools to process discomfort. Mature men don't ghost, vanish, or leave things unsaid when things get complicated. They communicate. But emotionally underdeveloped men? They run, they shut down, they avoid. Because confrontation requires emotional depth they haven't developed. And every day he ignores you, he's actually giving you evidence of how unequipped he is to handle a relationship built on accountability, respect, and emotional presence. That's not someone who's protecting peace, it's someone protecting his ego. Many women make the mistake of romanticizing this behavior. They tell themselves, maybe he just needs time, or maybe he's figuring things out. But that internal narrative is dangerous. It makes you wait around for someone who's already showing you he can't meet you where you are. You start analyzing every detail, the last text, the last conversation, as if there's a secret code hidden in his silence. But there's no code. The silence itself is the message. He's not emotionally equipped, and he's hoping you'll tolerate that. Instead of wondering what you did wrong, ask yourself why you're accepting emotional immaturity as a love language. Ignoring someone isn't mysterious or masculine, it's cowardly. And the more you excuse it, the more you reinforce the belief that men don't need to show up emotionally. That has to stop. The shift happens when you recognize that your emotional intelligence deserves to be matched, not managed. You don't need to chase closure from someone who uses silence to hide from himself. When a man ignores you, he's not showing you how little he cares. He's showing you how little he knows about emotional responsibility. He thinks withdrawal protects him, but it actually reveals him. And the more space you give him to disappear without consequence, the more he believes he can get by without ever growing up. When a man realizes he can't manipulate you emotionally, he doesn't step up. He pulls away. It's not about needing space, clarity, or time to think. It's about realizing that the usual tactics he's used in the past, guilt tripping, hot and cold behavior, silent treatment, don't work on you. You're too aware. You're too self-assured. And that's exactly what rattles him. So instead of adjusting, instead of growing, he retreats. That withdrawal isn't power, it's avoidance. It's a man walking away from a woman he can't control. What many women miss is that emotional manipulation isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it looks like a man playing the victim when you set a boundary. Sometimes it's subtle, like pulling back just enough to make you question yourself, wondering if you said too much or cared too fast. And when you don't take the bait, when you stand firm in who you are without begging or over-explaining, it triggers something in him. A realization that you can't be played the way others may have been. That realization makes him uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, but because you're different. You're harder to shake. This is where a lot of women fall into the trap. They think, maybe I was too intense, or I should have been more flexible. So they start dialing themselves down, apologizing for having standards, softening boundaries that were meant to protect them, and chasing a connection that's now being withheld like a reward. But all that does is signal to him that the manipulation might still work if he waits long enough. Don't do it. Don't teach a man that the price of staying in your life is your self-betrayal. When a man pulls away because you're too solid to be swayed, let him go. You've already won something more valuable. Self-respect. What really messes with him is when he pulls away and you don't chase. That silence from you, not the angry kind, not the desperate kind, but the calm, confident kind, is what breaks his pattern. Because now he's not just dealing with a woman who sees through him, he's dealing with a woman who won't tolerate inconsistency as a form of attention. That terrifies him. It forces him to confront a question he's been avoiding. What happens when manipulation stops working? That's where his weakness lives. In the space where emotional games used to get him results, but now only get him distance. And he doesn't know what to do with that. Your absence doesn't just create space, it creates a mirror. And the man who pulled away or started ignoring you is suddenly left with nothing to distract him from the truth he's been trying to avoid. His own sense of self-worth. When you're around, your presence cushions him. It gives him attention, validation, and the illusion of being enough, even if he's doing the bare minimum. But when you stop showing up, stop texting, stop reaching, he has to sit with the reality of what remains. And often, what remains is a deep feeling of inadequacy that he's been dodging his entire life. Most women don't realize this because they're too focused on what they feel when they back off. The urge to check in, to reconnect, to fix something. It's strong. But what they forget is that their presence is often doing emotional labor for the man. When you're constantly there, constantly giving, it lets him avoid doing the inner work. He doesn't have to ask himself why he pulls away or why he's afraid of real closeness, because your attention is acting like a buffer. And once you remove that buffer, the emotional silence becomes deafening. That's when his own thoughts start to surface. And for many men, that's exactly what they fear. There's a pattern that plays out in so many women's lives. They pull away hoping he'll notice, and the second he does, they come running back. That short burst of attention feels like validation, like their absence works. But that's not what growth looks like. That's not real change. What women need to understand is that the power of their absence lies not in triggering him, but in allowing themselves to break the cycle. You're not pulling away to get a reaction. You're pulling away because you refuse to be the emotional crutch for a man who won't even face himself. Your silence can do what your words never could. It forces him into a confrontation with himself. Maybe for the first time, he has to ask, why did I sabotage something real? Or why do I only feel valuable when I'm being chased? Those aren't comfortable questions, and most men have spent years distracting themselves from the answers. But now, with you gone, those answers have room to rise. That discomfort he's feeling, that's not about missing you. That's about realizing how much he depended on your presence to avoid his own reflection. And the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more intense that reflection becomes. Because now he knows you weren't the problem. You were the mirror. When a man suddenly goes quiet, it doesn't mean everything is calm in his world. It usually means the opposite. His silence isn't peace, it's pressure. It's confusion, fear, and emotional conflict building inside him like a storm he doesn't know how to handle. Most women misinterpret that silence as detachment, as if he just stopped caring. But in reality, silence is his attempt to contain something messy within himself. He's not shutting you out because he's sure of what he wants. He's going quiet because he doesn't even know what he feels, let alone how to express it. Men are often taught to internalize their struggles. Be strong, don't cry, don't talk about your feelings. So when they're hit with emotional intensity, like the vulnerability of being truly seen, the fear of disappointing someone, or the shame of not measuring up, they don't reach for communication. They reach for escape. And that escape often looks like disappearing, pulling away, or shutting down completely. What's happening inside him might be anxiety, guilt, or self-doubt, but he's been conditioned to treat that as something to bury, not something to bring forward. So he gives you silence, not as a message, but as a defense mechanism. Women often blame themselves for that silence. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I should have been more understanding. And because of that guilt, they reach out more. They try to fix things, initiate conversations, offer softness in hopes of drawing him out. But what they don't realize is that silence isn't something you fix. It's something you observe. When you chase someone who's silent, you're not solving a problem. You're becoming a distraction from the internal chaos he's trying not to face. You give him something external to focus on, your messages, your reactions, your emotional investment, which allows him to delay facing his own. The healthier response is to stop absorbing his silence as your responsibility. If he's withdrawing emotionally, it's not your job to pull him out of it. It's your job to recognize that emotional unavailability, dressed as calmness, is still unavailability. He might seem in control on the surface, but underneath that stillness is a man overwhelmed by the emotional expectations of a relationship he doesn't know how to navigate. When you stop engaging with that silence, you create a powerful shift. You turn his chaos back toward him. And without your energy buffering it, he's forced to confront what's actually going on inside. Some of the most emotionally unavailable men look the most put together from the outside. They're composed, unbothered, in control. But that outer appearance is often a carefully managed shield, and the moment real intimacy challenges that shield, it cracks. Silence becomes the safest move. Not because he's strong, but because he's scared. Scared of failing, scared of vulnerability, scared of being seen and not knowing how to show up. And the longer he stays silent, the more that fear compounds into self-sabotage. He's not communicating because he's chaotic inside, and silence is the only thing he knows how to control. When a man pulls away and goes silent, it's often not because he's done with you. It's because he's hoping you're not done with him. There's a twisted kind of comfort some men find in your pursuit. Your texts, your overthinking, your attempts to reconnect, they validate him, a signal that he still matters, even when he's doing the bare minimum. This isn't about love or commitment. It's about reassurance. And the longer you chase, the longer he gets to feel important without putting in any emotional effort. What's really going on here is a power dynamic built on emotional dependence. The man who withdraws and waits for you to chase is feeding off your need for closure. He knows you're wired to want clarity, to want answers, to want peace, and he's using that against you. So when he stops reaching out, when he doesn't reply, he's watching to see if you'll break your own boundaries just to hear from him. That little ego boost tells him he still has access to you, even when he's not showing up for you. It's not conscious manipulation for every man, but it is a pattern, and it keeps women stuck. One of the biggest mistakes women make is thinking that chasing him proves they care. It doesn't. It proves they've been trained to confuse effort with worthiness. So they double text, they call, they make excuses for his behavior, and they label it as loyalty. But the truth is, every time you chase a man who's pulling away, you're reinforcing the very behavior that hurt you. You're teaching him that you'll settle for breadcrumbs. That's not love. That's emotional survival, and it's exhausting. The healthier approach is to recognize the game and choose not to play it. When you stop chasing, you're not being cold. You're being clear. You're showing that your self-worth doesn't hinge on his validation, and that creates a shift. Because the moment you stop responding the way he expects, he's left with something he wasn't prepared to face: your absence. That's when the real test begins. Not for you, but for him. Now he has to ask himself why he needs someone to chase him just to feel seen. That discomfort might force growth, or it might drive him further into avoidance. But either way, you've stopped shrinking to fit a version of yourself that wasn't sustainable. The irony is that the man who wants you to chase isn't confident. He's insecure. He needs your pursuit to feel powerful, because without it, he has to confront how emotionally disconnected he's been. When you pull back instead of reaching out, it creates a void he didn't expect. And that void isn't just empty, it's revealing. It shows him that connection isn't something he can control by withholding effort. It has to be earned. And if he's not willing to earn it, then he's not ready for what you're actually offering. Letting a man feel the full weight of losing you is not cruel, it's clarity. It's the one thing that disrupts the cycle he's used to: pulling away, ignoring you, then watching you come right back. That pattern has taught him that he can take space without consequence, disappear without explanation, and you'll still be there when he decides to return. But when you stop playing along, when you stop softening the blow of his absence with your presence, it creates a shock he didn't expect. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifts, not because you're punishing him, but because you're finally respecting yourself. Most women are taught to make the breakup or pullback easier for the man, even when he's the one who caused the emotional damage. You explain, you over-explain, you try to make him feel better about hurting you, you leave the door open just in case. But what that does is remove any emotional accountability. He doesn't feel the loss because you never actually give him the experience of losing you. And without that sting, he never learns. He never grows. He just repeats the same avoidant, dismissive, emotionally careless behavior with you and the next woman too. Letting him sit with the loss doesn't mean being bitter or dramatic. It means being unavailable. No long texts trying to get closure. No checking up on him through mutual friends. No leaving breadcrumbs for him to follow. It means you allow the consequences of his decisions to unfold naturally. If he was willing to walk away or go silent, then he should also be willing to experience what that silence costs him. The more that space, that absence, is where real clarity is born. And not just for him, but for you too. Here's what most women don't realize. Men often don't process the breakup or distance when it happens. They process it when the woman they took for granted no longer responds the same way. The moment you stop being emotionally available, the moment he senses your energy has shifted, that's when reality sets in. Not because he's suddenly found emotional maturity, but because the convenience of your emotional labor is gone. He didn't expect you to actually stay gone. And now, every part of him is trying to figure out why he's uncomfortable in a space he thought he wanted. What messes with him the most is the contrast. He remembers the version of you that cared too much, tried too hard, stayed too long. And now, he's looking at a version that's no longer waiting around. That gap in your behavior creates a mirror, one that shows him exactly what he lost and exactly what he failed to value. You're not throwing it in his face. You're just not making yourself available to soothe his guilt or confusion. That's not cruelty. That's emotional maturity. And it's one of the only things that gets through to someone who's used to getting their way without having to reflect. The biggest mistake women make is thinking that walking away makes them look cold or heartless. So they hang around emotionally, half in, half out, hoping their softness will bring him back. But men don't feel urgency when they know you're still there. They feel urgency when your silence becomes real, when your energy closes off, when your name is no longer coming through their phone. That's when he starts questioning everything. So when you start feeling that, not just about you, but about himself, because now there's no distraction, no buffer, just the raw truth that he had something good and didn't show up for it. And here's what's so powerful about letting him sit with the loss. It puts responsibility exactly where it belongs. You're not fixing. You're not chasing. You're not managing his discomfort. You're letting him stand in it on his own. And in doing so, you give yourself something far more powerful than control. You give yourself freedom. Not the kind that comes from walking away, but the kind that comes from knowing you didn't have to sacrifice your dignity to make someone stay. You let him experience what life is like without you. And now the question isn't whether you are enough. It's whether he ever will be. The moment a man pulls away and goes silent, what he secretly fears isn't that you'll forget him. It's that you'll evolve without him. His silence isn't confidence. It's not emotional strength. It's a gamble. He's betting on your attachment being stronger than your growth. He's hoping that if he stays quiet long enough, you'll start questioning your worth, dialing yourself down, and putting your life on pause until he decides to come back. But what unsettles him the most is the idea that you might not wait, that you'll take his silence and use it as fuel to build a life where he's irrelevant. That fear, the fear of being left behind emotionally, is something most men don't talk about, but it drives a lot of their behavior, especially the avoidant ones. The men who push you away and then linger silently in the background are usually the ones who can't stand to see you do well without them. They don't want to invest in the emotional work required to be part of your life, but they also don't want to face the reality of being excluded from your growth. That's why you'll notice the weird timing. They ignore you while you're available and reappear the moment you start glowing without them. A lot of women make the mistake of interpreting that reappearance as love. They think he must still care. He's checking in. No. What he's doing is checking your progress. He wants to know if the door's still cracked open. He wants to see if he still has emotional access. Because if you're still waiting, if you're still responding like nothing's changed, it reassures him that he can stay stagnant while you hold space for him. But if you've moved on, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, that's what shakes him. Not because he lost you, but because he realizes you didn't need him to rise. Men who are emotionally underdeveloped often struggle to celebrate a woman's independence. It makes them feel irrelevant. Instead of feeling proud of you, they feel threatened by your ability to thrive without their presence or approval. So they might downplay your progress, go quiet when you're doing well, or even criticize your choices once you start making moves without them. And that's not about you. That's about his internal battle with self-worth. Your evolution reminds him of the parts of himself he's not growing, and that reflection makes him uncomfortable. The most powerful response you can have is to stop shrinking your life to keep the connection alive. If he went silent, let him. If he pulled back, let him. Sit in that distance. But you keep going. Focus on your body, your mind, your finances, your peace. Because nothing exposes his weakness more than your ability to build without looking back. And you don't need to post it all over social media to prove anything. Real growth is quiet. It's when you stop wondering what he's thinking and start investing that energy into yourself. And that's the shift he wasn't prepared for. When a woman no longer needs a man's attention to validate her worth, she becomes a mirror he can't avoid. Your growth without him doesn't just mean you're moving forward. It means you're becoming the version of yourself he secretly feared you'd become. The version that no longer tolerates crumbs. The version that sees through excuses. The version that no longer needs potential when she's already building fulfillment on her own. That's where his real weak spot lies. Not in your silence toward him, but in the life you're creating that no longer includes him. And the truth is, nothing scares an emotionally unprepared man more than watching a woman heal from the wound he caused and never look back. So here's the truth you need to hold on to. When a man pulls away and ignores you, it's not a reflection of your value. It's a spotlight on his limitations. His silence doesn't mean you're not enough. It means he's not ready to meet the woman you're becoming. The greatest weakness of a man who disappears isn't in the space he creates. It's in the power you discover when you stop filling it. So stop waiting, stop wondering, and start rising. Because the second you let his silence speak for itself, you reclaim every ounce of the energy he hoped you'd waste chasing him,